Hi everybody, I'm Zilliblitz and welcome. Today we're going to do a first look sneak peek at Operation Barclay. Now this is a game from Salt and Pepper Games designed by Maurice Suckling that's coming to crowdfunding on early June 2024. We're going to take a look at the components, we'll show how gameplay works, we'll play a turn, and then give some impressions of gameplay. This is a two-player deception and logic-based game that uses Operation Barclay from World War II as kind of a thematic backdrop. Before we jump in and take a look at the components, let's talk for a moment on the history of Operation Barclay because it is the essence of the game and some of us might not be that familiar with it. So Operation Barclay was part of Operation Husky in World War II, which was basically the Allied invasion in 1943. As the tide of World War II was shifting, the Allies decided they were going to invade up through the underbelly of Europe, most specifically up through Sicily. But they wanted the Germans to think that the Allies were going to invade up through Greece, so Germany would divert forces to Greece, making Operation Husky and the landings at Sicily all that much easier to execute. It's a really cool story because the British created a fake army, the British 12th Army, with fictitious divisions to try to fool the Germans. There was Operation Waterfall as part of Operation Barclay, where they created a whole decoy army in Libya, so the Germans would think they were getting ready to invade up through the Balkans. And then, of course, the classic story of Operation Mincemeat, where the British Secret Service took a cadaver, gave him an entire life story, loaded him up with fake secret documents, dumped him off the coast to Spain so that the Germans would fight him, think they had captured secret documents that told the invasion was going up through Greece to fool the Germans that way. Now, Operation Barclay worked. The Germans did divert a lot of forces to the Greek theater, making the landings in Sicily all that much more easy to execute. That's the thematic backdrop to this game, and that's in essence what this game is about. As the Allied forces, you're trying to protect the true landing area, the true area of operations out of one of 5 areas from the Germans. And as the Germans, you're trying to use logic and deception and this card-based gameplay to try to figure out where the Allies are actually going to execute Operation Husky. With that in mind, and now we understand the theme of the game, let's jump in and take a look at the components and get started exploring this game. Let's start out with a quick look at our components. Quick caveat as we do, these are prototype components, in particular the rule book here, which I've printed out in black and white. This will be full color in the final version, of course. The biggest thing we can see in the middle here is the 15-inch by 15-inch map. This depicts the Mediterranean area where Operation Husky can potentially occur. We'll talk about this as we go forward, but the biggest thing to note right now is that there are 5 potential invasion areas for the Allies, each one designated by 5 markers of 5 different colors. So pink, red, blue, green, and purple. And at the beginning of the game, the Allied player is going to secretly choose one of these areas to be the real invasion zone, and that's the crux of the game. The Axis player is trying to figure out which one of these 5 areas is the real invasion area. The Allied player is trying to prevent that. There's some other areas around this, a turn marker up here. You'll notice there are 6 months. Each turn is 1 month. It starts in February of 1943 and it ends in July of 1943. Then we've got a couple of other areas here that I'll talk about later, which are intelligent assessment tokens and then places for the evidence boxes. And we'll see how all this works momentarily. Now, we have a number of tokens that are floating around the board. Over here on the left-hand side, these are the intelligence tokens. These are what the British player is going to place upside down on these different areas to designate which of the areas is the real invasion zone and which ones are diversionary zones. We'll talk about how that works in just a moment. Then we have some evidence tokens. These are going to get placed here. We'll talk about how those work. There are 6 of them. Then we have intelligence assessment tokens, which are here, 2 each, 2 for the Axis player and 2 for the British player. We'll talk about how those work. Turn record markers are these X's. You're going to drop them on the months there to designate that that month has gone past, and the Germans have to win the game after 6 months, otherwise the Allies win. And the other thing we want to take a quick look at, we have 3 different decks of cards, and let's explore those a bit now. So what we're looking at now is 8 of the 60 intelligence channels cards, and these cards are what are basically the heart of gameplay. So each turn, each of the 6-month turns in the game, both players are competing to win kind of poker-esque types of hands using these cards, and by winning hands you're going to be able to advance your cause, either concealing the invasion if you're the Allies, or revealing the invasion if you're the location if you're the Germans. Now we'll dig into more details on these later, but you will note that there are a number numbers in the top left, and there's a number of other elements to them as well in terms of some of these have icons over here, some of these have these 3 or 2 markers, they all have some kind of a marker there, and then they could have special text that allows these cards to be used in more unique ways. We'll come back to these later as we look at how gameplay moves forward, but this again is the heart of the play. Each player is going to have a hand of these, and they're going to be playing these out as they go through each turn, trying to win the better hand so you can kind of advance your cause. Now, in addition to the core deck of 60 cards, each player also has a 13-card deck of intelligence cards that are specifically designed for them, and these in general are much more powerful than the regular cards in the intelligence channels deck that are accessible to both players. What we're looking at right now, for example, the 4 on the left are 4 specific cards to the British intelligence, and the 4 on the right here are 4 of the 13 cards available to the German intelligence. And we can see, for example, British 12th Army. And these cards, and these have historical connotations, Operation Mincemeat, one of the ones we're looking at down here on the left. And each one of these cards have generally have more powerful features than the standard cards. So one of the things as you're playing the game is you're going to be deciding when you should play these and when you should hold them, because there are only 13. You want to play them at the right time, and you also don't know when these are going to actually come into your active hand, and we'll talk about that as we see gameplay. But the big point to take away from this is a lot of cards, 86 cards altogether, 60 in a core deck and 13 each specific to you, and learning how to play these decks well is really the heart of doing well in Operation Barclay. So let's jump in and learn how to play. The first thing we're going to do is talk about how we set up the game. This again is very much a 2-player game. I'm showing this as one person, but this is a 2-player game. I wouldn't recommend playing or getting this game solitaire. It's not really built for that. But once you determine which player is the allied player, once you determine which player is the Axis player kind of has to leave the room or avert their eyes or just go entertain themselves for a few minutes, while the allied player has a very big decision to make, which is decide which one of these 5 zones is going to be the active landing zone where Operation Husky is going to take place. And the way the allied player does this is through the use of these 25 intelligence tokens. Now we can see there are 25 of them here. There is a hidden side here, which is this yellow kind of sunset kind of thing over the ocean. And then we have red radar and green radar right here, green being active. And so the first thing the allied player has to do is to create 5 different sets of these tokens that are going to distinguish between the main landing zone, a secondary landing zone, and then 3 diversionary landing zones. And let's show how they do that. So as the allied player, I've made 5 sets now of these tokens of 5. And you'll notice there are 3 different types. We have 3 red and 2 green. We have 3 of those sets. These are going to represent diversionary zones. So 3 red radar and 2 green radar in a zone means the invasion isn't taking place here. We have 1 set that has 3 green and 2 red. This is a secondary zone. But the main zone, where Operation Husky will take place, has 4 green tokens and 1 red token. And now we're going to put these into the zones to determine which one's going to be the main, which one's going to be the secondary, and which 3 are going to be the diversionary zones. So as the allied player, let's say that we're going to have the allies go up through Sardinia and Corsica here in this red zone. That's going to be the main zone. And then we're going to make the Turkish route here be the secondary zone, and the other 3 are going to be diversionary. So I'll set these up as to how that would look. So here we go. We've set them up. We've got 3 red, 2 green, diversionary zone for the west here. 3 red, 2 green for the Sicily route. 4 green and 1 red for the main route going up through Corsica and Sardinia. Then 3 red, 2 green for going up through Greece. And then 3 green for the secondary route going up through Turkey. Now, obviously, what we're going to do now is we're going to flip these over so that when the Axis player comes back to the board, he won't be able to see, or she won't be able to see which one is the real ones and such. So I'll do that now. All right, we've got all our zones set up. Now, as the allied player, we know this is the main zone, and it doesn't matter where inside of these zones the green and red go, so long as you've got the numbers correct. That's the main part of the deception part here for the allied player. The Axis player can now come back to the table and the game is ready to go, with the caveat that we need to set up the various other things that are involved with the setup. So let's do that now. So the next things we need to do for setup are basically put the turn markers by the calendar. We're going to take the 6 evidence tokens and we're going to drop them in the evidence bag, seal that up, and then shake them up. We'll talk about what we're going to do with those momentarily. Then we create the 3 decks. We've got the Abwehr deck, which is the 13 specific cards for the Axis forces, the LCS deck for the 13 specific cards for the British forces, the main deck all shuffled up and placed face down, so these are where they go. And then we have these 2 intelligence assessment tokens for each side, one for the British and then one for the Axis forces over here, and those are given to each player. Now we are just about set to ready to be able to begin the first turn. The only thing we have to do now is to deal 4 cards from this deck face down to each player. So we'll have the German player be at the bottom of the screen here. We'll have the British player be at the top, and we've dealt out the 4 cards. Now, normally, the British player is not going to be able to see the German player's cards. The Axis player is not going to be able to see the Allied player's cards, and so forth. For the sake of showing this, we're just going to show them all so that you can see them. But normally, as one player, as the Axis player, you'd be looking at these 4 cards. You know what they are, but you have no idea what the Allied cards are. We are ready now with the complete setup, and we're ready to start our game. So now we're ready to play the first turn, but we don't yet understand how to win and how to play. So let's talk first about how we win the game, and then we'll talk a little bit about what players are trying to do and how we make the connection between the card playing game and these intelligence tokens. So first up, the German player wins automatically once they successfully identify, by flipping over enough tiles, the correct main priority landing zone. So we know as the British player, there are 5 tokens in this Sardinia-Corsica route right here. If the German player flips over 4 green tokens out of these 5, he has successfully identified the landing zone and he immediately wins the game. The second way the German player can immediately win the game, if by conclusive logic, the German player, the Axis player, can determine the correct landing zone. So this would basically be by flipping over enough red tokens in the other zones that the only zone left that could possibly be the invasion zone would be the one that's remaining. That's another way to win. There's not a guessing element involved. It has to be conclusive. So that's what the German player is trying to do, is to flip over these intelligence tokens. But now the big question is, how do they flip over the intelligence tokens? And that's where these evidence tokens in this bag come in, and we can start the very first turn. So there are 6 evidence tokens in here. We're going to start the first turn because we'll play through this first turn to show how gameplay works. The first thing we do at the beginning of the turn is we're going to take out 2 of these evidence tokens hidden from the bag and put them in this alpha area on the evidence box. The next thing we're going to do is to take out 3 more intelligence tokens here, evidence tokens, and we're going to put them in the beta box down here. This is the second category where they go. And then the last one here goes in this reconnaissance raid zone. And basically, we've now divided these evidence tokens up into 3 different categories. And each turn is a battle between 2 players to try to win these 3 different categories to either prevent the Axis player from flipping over tokens or winning tokens so that the Axis player can flip them over. Now, very quickly, you'll notice too that each of these 6 tokens is uniquely colored. 5 of them are colored to correspond to a particular landing zone. One of them, the black one, corresponds to any zone the Axis player would like to have it attributed to. So this lighter blue one here goes to the Sicily route. The green one here goes to the Greek route. And basically, if the German player wins these 2, for example, wins this alpha battle up here, they can flip over any token they want to in the blue zone and any token they want to in the green zone. If the British player wins it, that means that nothing gets flipped over. And so the British player is basically trying to prevent things from getting flipped over. The German player is trying to flip over these tokens. So each round will be a battle for these 3 different areas. And the next question we, of course, have is, well, what do these 3 different categories distinguish here? The top one here, this alpha category, is at the end of the round, which player has the best 5 cards in play. Each round, players are going to play 5 cards, and it's kind of like a poker type comparison to these cards that are out in play. Whichever has the best hand of 5 cards played and on the table wins these 2 tokens. Now here's where it gets really interesting. A little bit over halfway through the round, both players are going to bet, by the nature of these intelligence assessment tokens, which player they think will have the best hand at the end of the round. That's what determines who wins these 3 tokens in the beta channel. So basically, if the German player says, I think the British player is going to have the better hand at the end of the round, and the British player thinks, I think the German player is going to have the better hand of the round, the German player would have won that bet and get all 3 of these tokens. Now, if it's a tie and both players get it right, then the German player gets one of these 3 tokens. If neither player gets it right, then no player gets a token. So the really neat thing here is that you can actually almost intentionally tank as one player to say, I think I'm going to lose, and win more tokens than the player who actually wins the round. So it creates this very interesting kind of tug of war and back and forth as to what you're trying to do as you're playing cards in a particular hand. We'll see this as game plays out, as the game turn plays out a little bit. Now, the last token over here is what's called the Reconnaissance Raid Evidence Token. This one here, some of the cards have recon icons on them, and some of the cards have raid icons on them. And whoever has the most in either one of those 2 categories wins this last token. And we'll show how this works. But essentially, that's the gameplay, and that's the link between the card play and the evidence tokens and flipping over the counters, the intelligence tokens on the map. So as we go into the first round now, the German player is trying to have the better hand to win these 2. British players trying to have the better hand to not prevent these from getting flipped over. Both players, depending upon who they guess and think will have the better hand, will have some share of these in here, and then the reconnaissance raids will be the 3rd one. Now we know enough now to be able to actually go in and to start our actual gameplay. We are all set for the first turn. So now, after all this chatter, we can finally start to play. Let's play a turn to see how gameplay works. Now, each turn, each of the 6 one-month turns, is divided up into 2 segments. A segment where you play 3 cards, and then a segment where you play 2 cards. And there's an intermediate step in between those 2 segments. We'll explain more as we go along, but basically the German player, the Abwehr player, goes first. And the basic gameplay is that we're going to alternate playing cards. You're going to play a card, and then you're going to draw a card either from the intelligence deck or from your kind of specialized card deck, which one you want at the end of the turn. So you're always going to you're going to end your play with 4 cards hidden in your hand. And again, these 4 cards, if we're playing with 2 players, only the German player would see these cards. The British player isn't going to see them. We're playing with them face up because we're just kind of doing a demonstration of gameplay. So the question here for the German player is, what card do we play? What are we trying to do? Mostly, if you're familiar with 5-card poker, you're going to be able to kind of figure out the thinking for this, because what we're trying to do is get things like pairs, 3 of a kind, full house, flushes, straights, and those kinds of things like that. We can see right now as we look at these numbers, 2, 5, 8, 4, we don't have any pairs. We potentially, though, have a straight here because we have 2, 5, and 4. So if we were to get a 3 and then a 1 and a 6 as we draw more cards into our hidden deck here, we could potentially have a straight. But we'll also notice that some of these cards have this specialized text down the bottom here. And this one here, Spy in Benghazi, is one of those cards. And it says, if you play this to the tableau, to the played cards, as one of the first 3 cards, which if we did that now, it would be one of the first 3 cards in the round, then we draw 2 cards from the intelligence deck, pick one of them to add to our hand, and put the other one in what is called a double cross deck. So let's do that. And then you don't draw another card at the end of your turn, because by picking one of those 2 cards, you're going to end up with 4 cards in your hand. So we're going to play to the tableau, or play to the table, this Spy in Benghazi. We'll also note too here, there is a 3 and a 2. The 3 means that you can play this in the first round of 3 cards, and the 2 means you can play it in the second round. So we could play this at any time, but we're going to play it as one of the first 3 cards to qualify it for this cause where we can draw 2 cards from the intelligence deck. Intelligence deck can keep one of them. So we're going to do that now, picking 2 cards off the intelligence deck, and we get a double agent in Nice and a double agent in Algiers, a 1 and a 13 and then an 11. Interesting. So let's think. So both of these cards allow us to do kind of the same special ability. So I'm trying to think which one we want to keep. I think we're going to keep, for the sake of moving things along, I think we'll keep the 1 here, because that gives us a potential straight. If we can get, we now have a 1, 2, 4, 5. That's a potential straight. So we're going to keep this one in our hand, our hidden hand. We've played this one to the table. And this one here goes to what's called the double cross deck. Now let's take a look and see what that means. So the double cross deck doesn't exist right now, but in the final version of the game, I think there's going to be a little marker here for that. So we put this card as the Axis player. We're going to put it face down here. We can now draw this card instead of drawing a card from the intelligence deck or our own specialized cards. So we have 3 places we can pick cards from now at the end of our next turn, and we know what this one is. So we've got hidden intelligence that knows what this one is. The British player does not know what this one is. So that works to our advantage a little bit here. And that ends the German turn. They've played 1 card. Let's go to the British turn now to play a card. So the British player has 4 cards, and we have a pair of 2s. The 2s is, it's a low value pair, but it is a pair that we could potentially get into play. We don't have any cards that allow us special activities. All 4 of these cards can be played in the first or second round. But these 2 cards here, you'll notice they have this aircraft icon. That's the recon icon. So if we get that in play, we can potentially win that recon raid category, which might be a good one to get us a little bit the ways there. And we could potentially play this pair, and maybe we'll get something off of that. But I think we're going to play actually the purple one, because maybe we have a potential for a flush if we get 5 purple cards. So for the sake of moving things along, we're going to have the British player play this 2. Radio Chatter Alexander. We get a recon token in play here, a recon item in play. And now that we've played a card here, as the British player, we can choose a card. We can to replace one of our 3 cards. We could pick from the General Intelligence deck, or we could pick from the Double Cross deck, which we don't know what that card is as the British player. The German player is the only one who knows that. But let's, for the sake of showing what this can happen here, let's pick a card from our specialized 13 card LCS deck, because we know these are powerful cards, and let's see if we can get these into play. So this one here is a A-Force card. Let's take a look, and just to get an idea on what this could potentially be, let's read this card. So this card is rather unique. It allows you to play this card up to your hand, but then you replace this card with a card in your discard pile at the end of the round, in the final part of the round. So this is potentially a very powerful card. However, we don't have any cards discarded yet because we're in the first game turn. So this is no use to the British player right now, because we can't really play anything from our discard. As cards go into the discard pile, this will become more valuable. So it's a good card for us as the British, but we're not going to be able to use it this round probably. German player's turn to play their second card. There's not a heck of a lot coming out here that I see. I mean, we don't make any pairs. We could go for the potential flush here, but without any more green cards, I think that's pretty unlikely. Let's still kind of build off of this straight option. We're going to play Radio Chatter Palermo, which is a 4. We've now got a 4 and a 5, so it looks like we might have a strong hand here. And we've got a raid icon in play, which will help with that category. Now let's pick a card. We're going to have the German player also pick from their Abwehr deck, their specialized deck here. Oh, very nice. Look at this. So this card has 2 numbers on it, a 3 and a 4, which means we can play it for either of the 2. As the German player right now, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Boom, we get a straight. This is looking pretty good for the German player. We'll also note on this Wilhelm Canaris card, this could be played as any suit because it's got multiple rainbow colors. It's got a recon icon in it, which is good too. And this has a recon. That would give us 2 recon cards as well, 2 recon tokens as well. In the evidence result step, which is basically where you're comparing wins, if the Abwehr player wins, not ties, the beta box evidence tokens, you may turn over 1 extra evidence tile this month. So potentially this could be a real big windfall for us. But I think as a German player now, we have a path forward. Let's go to the British player. British player's in kind of a mess here. They really can't play this card. Although it's powerful later, it's not powerful now. We could play the pair, but we don't really know what the German player is going to do. So I think as the British player, let's actually just do that. We'll play the pair here. We'll play the number 2, giving us a pair, giving us 2 recon icons, which perhaps will help us to win at least that category. Now we can pick one more. Let's pick from the intelligence deck here, just because we know we can. So we get a 5. This is a spy in Algiers. This is one that allows us to pick 2 cards and choose the one we want. So I think we'll play this one next in hopes we're kind of trying to strengthen our hand this round. Let's go now to the German player. So as the German player, we have a few options here. We could play this 3-4 card to make it look like we're going for a pair of 4s, which would probably be one way to kind of give indication to the British player what we'd try to be playing for. But I think actually we're going to play this double agent in Nice card. And the reason I want to do that here is because of its loyalties examined ability. It says, if you play this to the tableau, which we just did as one of the first 3 cards and not a replacement, you may look at and arrange the top 3 cards of the double cross deck or the intelligence channels deck. And so we can rearrange these. So let's do that because we want to screw the British player over and make sure they don't get any more 2s or something like that. So we're going to pick the top 3 cards off the intelligence deck here as the German player. Oh my goodness, this is pretty good here. And we're going to rearrange them, and then we get to pick which one that we want. So the question, because we're going to pick one of these if we want it. Let's think. So I think a good play for us here as the German player is actually to put this 3 up on the top and grab this one, because that will allow us to save this 3-4 card for another round, which is going to be more powerful. So we're going to pick, we'll put this one on top. We'll give the British player the 6 one because we don't really care, and then maybe we'll get the 3 one later. So we're going to do this, 3, 6, 3, put them back on top, and then the German player gets to pick the 3 to fill their hand with, and now we have another full card. So we can get our straight 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 without using our really powerful card. Let's go to the British player. So the British player at this point is really kind of playing for like 3 of a kind or perhaps 2 pairs. We really don't have anything powerful to play up here. I think we can go for, we could keep the 4 and the 5 for the next round perhaps to kind of run some kind of a straight. So let's actually play this 9 card here. So we'll keep this, and we're going to keep these other cards for the next round. Now the question is, do we want to play as the British player, do we want to take an LCS card, or do we want to take a card from the intelligence deck? Assuming that the German player put that there because they didn't want that card, let's take an LCS card to screw the British player up, to screw the German player up. We get 4 commando groups, which is allows us to play 4, and it's, oh, this is actually powerful because it's got a red X. It negates all of the recon icons for the opposing player. And it gives us a raid icon, which would help as well. So some potential good uses with this one. It does also allow us to play the 2 4s, which would give us 2 pair. That's immediately pretty powerful for the British player. But, okay, our first round now of this turn is over. And now it's time for each player to compare the cards that have been played and to make their bets who they think is actually going to win the round. To do this, the German player and the British player each have these 2 intelligence assessment tokens. On one side is the German insignia, and the other side is the British one. You pick the one that designates which side you think is going to win the round. So as the German player, we know we have a straight. And looking up here, it looks like the British player is going to have 2 pairs, perhaps, could get the best it can get at this point. So we know that a straight is stronger in the scoring system than 2 pairs. So at this point, I'm feeling pretty confident as the German player that we can win this round. So we're going to bet on ourselves as the German player. We're going to take this token here. We bring this over to the intelligence assessments token area of the board. We play it face down, betting on ourselves. Now, as the British player, we've got a 2-2-9, and we see a 1-4-5 out here. I mean, as the British player, I'd be thinking maybe the German player's got, like, I don't know why they played this one, unless they might actually be going for a straight, in which case we know they're going to be better than us. But I think as the British player, just for the sake of kind of moving through the motions, let's bet on ourselves, because I think we can get 2 pair, and that might be enough to carry this hand. So British player is going to bet on themselves. I put that over just the same way that I did as the German player. And so the 2 intelligence assessment tokens are down in play. These go back to their respective players. And now it comes time for us to play the next 2 cards. So now we go to the last 2 card plays. Same as the first round, except this time their cards are played face down. And we know what we're going to do as the Germans. We're going to play the 2 and the 3 here. So, and we can play them. It's noticed in the second round this is playable. So let's play this 2, but this goes face down to the table. The question is, which deck do we want to pick from? We know that the top of the intelligence card deck is, I think it was a 6, right? Which is not necessarily a bad card to have. We know the top card of the double cross deck is an 11. We don't know what the Abwehr deck is. Let's just take the Abwehr deck card just for kicks and giggles. Sympathetic Spanish Agents. So this is a card that is playable during the evidence results step. You can draw 2 cards from top of the intelligence channels or double-cross decks in any combination. Replace this card, but retain the icon with one of them, and return the other to the top of the double-cross deck face down. If insufficient cards to fulfill the instructions, this card cannot be played. So this is another one of those cards we can probably save for subsequent rounds. It's pretty powerful, but for now, for this round, it probably doesn't help us out. Let's go to the British. As the British player, we know what we're doing too. We're going to play for the 2 pair here, so we're going to play this one face down. And as the British player, let's take the intelligence card, deck card off the top here, which is a 6. This is also one of the ones that has a special unique feature to it, but that's only good in the first 3 cards, so we won't worry about that. Let's go back to the German player now. As the German player, we know we're going to play the 3. We're going to play that face down, and let's draw that card from the intelligence deck, which we remember is a 3 because of when we played this double agent card. So that's actually helpful because that gives us 2 3s to start off the next round, because you keep these cards between rounds. So the Germans have played their last card face down. Let's go to the British. British are going for their 2 pair here. So we're going to play commando groups face down. We'll place that like that. And let's take one from the top of the intelligence deck here to kind of build out our hand. We get an 11 double agent in Benghazi, and we'll keep that there. Now each side has played their 5 cards. Now we're going to flip the cards over and figure out who won. So let's flip over our cards and see who won the round. This is how we do this. Is the kind of the evidence result stage. Flip over the 2 German, flip over the 2 British, and we can see that the British have 2 pair. The Germans, however, have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is a straight. And we have a chart here that shows this. It's in the rule book, but basically the straight is stronger than the 2 pair. So the German player has won this hand. Let's go examine all the results here, however, to see what happens. So now comes the results phase. We're going to score the alpha phase first. The German player won the hand, so they get a blue and a green token. So blue is down here in this Sicily area. Let's have them flip over this intermediate one. They get a green token here. So the German player now knows that this is potentially just a little bit of information. That's the blue one that's played. The green one here is over through the Athens channel. Let's have them flip over this one here. It is a red here. So really nothing to determine too much for yet for the Germans, but they've got 2 tokens and they're on their way to identifying the correct area here. Now let's take a look at the intelligence assessment area. The German player bet on themselves. The British player bet on themselves. The German player therefore wins the beta category as well, getting 3 more tokens. So let's have them, they flip over one in the pink one. Let's flip over this one here. That is red. They get 1 in the purple area. Let's have them flip over Alexandria here. That is green. And then they get 1 in the black area, which is any one they want to. Boy, this is an interesting decision, what we want to do. Let's see if we can start to, because as we're playing further turns, you don't really know which ones of these you're going to win. So I'm not quite sure yet what would be the better strategy here. Let's say, for the sake of just balancing things out, the Germans are going to try to balance it out. They're going to flip over one here in Sardinia, so they get the green one there. That might not be the best strategy, I'm not quite sure. So the Germans have they did really well here in this first round, getting a good picture after only 1 turn as to where the invasion is looking like. Now we have to figure out who won the reconnaissance raid category. Let's go take a look at the cards to figure that out. Let's compare the hands to figure out who won the reconnaissance raid category. If we look for the British player, we see that they have 1, 2 of these reconnaissance tokens, so they get a 2 for the recon score. They have 1 for the raid score, so it's 2 for recon and 1 for raid for the British. Now for the Germans, we have 2 recon and 1 raid. So we might think that's a dead even tie, but we'll notice here the commando groups has a red X through their recon icon, which means that this negates all of the recon items of icons of your opponent. So the German final score, because this negates the recon icons, is 1 raid icon. The British have 2 recon icons. The 2 outscores the 1, so the British player wins the reconnaissance raid category of this turn. So we know that the British won the reconnaissance raid category, which means that they get this icon and they get this evidence token, and nothing happens because of that. And that brings us to the end of the first turn. So we're going to drop an X on February. We've played an entire turn in Operation Barclay. To continue on to the next turn, these tokens are reset, so the German player gets back theirs, the British player gets theirs back. We also are going to take the 6 icons here, drop them in the bag, and we would redistribute those over the evidence boxes here to set up for the next turn. And then lastly, we take the 5 German cards played and we put those off to the side as their personal discard deck. So that would go off to the side somewhere. And likewise, we do the same for the British. These are all in the British discard deck off to the side. We can also see now too that the German player has set up their 4 cards to start the next round. They're in pretty good shape. They got a pair of 3s already here. British players still kind of messed up, but now they have this card that allows them to pull out something from their discard pile, so that potentially could help them out here in terms of kind of figuring out what they might do in the next round. But a pretty strong round for the Germans here as they flip over 5 evidence tokens in only the first round. And so there you have it, Operation Barclay. I'd like to offer up some impressions now as we're closing out. I feel like this is very much a thinking game, and I feel like I've played it twice now. Both times have been fun, and we split the 2 games that I played. There's a lot of strategy and subtleties to thinking about how you want to play the cards. Like knowing if you have a bad hand and then betting on yourself to lose is actually not that bad of a strategy, or betting on the other player to win per se as you're going in there, because you can get these 3 tokens here. So sometimes having bad cards isn't necessarily a bad thing, and trying to be deceptive in terms of how you show your cards. And then you start to learn how your opponent is playing. And with all the special abilities in the cards, as much as the card-based play is poker-based, there's a lot of variability in terms of how you're switching cards in and pulling them out of your discard deck. And then you have this double cross deck that allows you to play things. You can flip over and you kind of can cycle and set these cards up as you're going through them, bringing in the more powerful cards for your Abwehr deck and your LCS deck and timing those right, kind of determining where you want to flip over these tokens here in terms of the German player. Some of the cards allow you to switch the location of the tokens up. So if you really need one in the blue area, you might have a card that allows you to switch it if you especially know that you're going to be able to get, if you're going to be able to win the hand, for example, because trying to get the right zone as it gets later in the game can be tricky, it can be hard as the German player. So there's just lots of layers of subtlety and strategy and fun to this game, and it plays really fast. It says 30 minutes. I think in the beginning, as you're kind of learning the cards and reading the rules on the cards and stuff like that, it's taking us longer to play than that. But I think certainly after about like another couple gameplays, I'm going to guess that we're down into that 30 to probably 45-minute range for playing a game. Some of them can go fast too, because if the German player figures out where it is in like the 4th turn, then it ends even more quickly. But the game plays fast. I think there's a lot of thinking. I love the Operation Barclay and the World War II based theme. Very accessible. So I think this would be a great game to introduce someone to a war game themed war game, although the gameplay again is very much, there's that poker card-based element, which is an abstract level of play in terms of a war game element. But that subtleties and the deception and the strategies I think are really fun in this game. So this is a winner. I think it's definitely in one of my categories as really solid 2-player experiences. And I think there's a lot of fun and a lot of depth, especially as you learn how your opponent plays, because it's really kind of a dance between the 2 of you in terms of how you're playing your cards. So part of it is knowing how to play well, and then part of it is knowing your opponent as well. So Operation Barclay, this is coming to crowdfunding in June of 2024. I'll put a link down below if you want to check it out. But I've thoroughly enjoyed my time with this. I'm looking forward to playing more. I think this one's definitely a keeper for me, and I hope if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Have a great day.